I know, it's been too long since I did one of these. Roll the title! It's laser time and we're gonna do a review. Yes, we're gonna review. We'll talk about movies and comics too. Let's all go watch the review. Hey everybody, I am Lazy Dude. Welcome to another comic book review. When I first started reading comics, I didn't have the best access to them. I mean, I lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere in Canada, so my access, and my family didn't have internet, so my access to comic books were very limited. I mean, for the longest time, I would just go to this grocery store that had a rack of comic books in the back, and I'd pick up stuff like Spider-Man and a few Batman stuff, and just stuff that, I would take whatever they could give me because I didn't have that many options. But sometimes for either my birthday or my brother's birthday, my parents would go, if they were in the city, they would buy a bunch of random different comic books from a comic book store and just see which ones we would like. And, give it to us for our birthdays. Which was nice. I was able to, get my hands on a few, but the problem is, they wouldn't buy like a trade, so I would only be getting like 1/6 of a story. I'd be like, well, that's interesting, but never get to know how that one ends. And one of the issues was from this series, Justice League, The Tornado's Path. The issue had Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman discussing on who they should let into the brand new Justice League. I love this idea. You never got to see them actually recruit and just say, oh, I want this person. Well, I don't want that person. Well, why don't you want that person? It was such a great idea. And it was so much fun, mostly because the writing from Brad Meltzer was just so good. You got to understand where our big three heroes were coming from. Because they don't all agree. Batman still kind of doesn't trust Hal Jordan because of the whole Parallax stuff that was going on. Wonder Woman doesn't want Captain Marvel because he's too inexperienced. And Superman doesn't really want Green Arrow because he's too opinionated. Now, there was other stuff going on in this story as well, but I was really just centered on that part. Just because the interactions with those big three heroes were so great. But as the story went on, Batman started being a little bit more forceful, not really listening to other people's opinions and really pushing his own really hard. And at the end of that issue, Superman puts a photo forward and says, all right, Wonder Woman, let's decide. Batman, in or out? And I needed to know. It was like, no, you can't kick Batman out of the league. Come on, he's Batman. Because he's Batman. So once I moved to the city for a little bit, I finally was able to pick up the rest of the issues and, the trade of The Tornado's Path. And that's what we're going to review today. The comic book I have read more than any other comic book in my life. This is my review of Justice League, The Tornado's Path, written by Brad Meltzer, with art done by N. Beans. The thing I like about The Tornado's Path and the way it puts the team together is it grabs heroes that you would expect, like the Trinity of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern and Black Canary, other people you would expect, but then it also goes into places you don't expect. We got Jefferson Pierce, aka Black Lightning, who, while he never did work with the League before, he was part of Batman's Outsiders. Roy Harper, aka Arsenal, who was with the Teen Titans and then the Titans. Mari, aka Vixen, who was part of the Justice League back in the Detroit era, so that barely counts. Hawkgirl, who this version of Hawkgirl is called Kendra because, the whole thing where Hawkman and Hawkgirl die and then they get reincarnated. Well, Hawkgirl died and was reincarnated, but Hawkman wasn't. And so he still has all the memories of their past lives and whatnot, but she has no idea who she is, so she calls her Kendra and she moved out on her own. And of course, the focus of the story, John Smith, the Red Tornado. And, we even have some cameos from other characters like Geo-Force from the Outsiders, Green Arrow, the Metal Men, and heck, even a few cameos from some villains as well. And so we all have these different stories going on with different characters doing different things, but our main three stories are A, the Trinity deciding who they're going to put on the new Justice League. B, the Red Tornado as he gets a human body and is living in it and his experience with being a robot turned human. And C, we got Arsenal, Green Lantern, and Black Canary tracking down Red Tornado's old body as somebody has stolen it. Since I've already talked about really the Trinity stuff, let's talk about Red Tornado, because you really feel for Red Tornado in this book, as he is finally, for the first time, being able to experience what it is like to be human. He is sweating, tasting, and feeling for the first time, and his wife gets to feel him back. You know, for the first time, she feels the warmth of his body, she feels like she's with a person. His wife, you actually see very early on when she's waiting for him to go back into his old robot body, she's saying stuff like, I don't know, you know, it's like, she says to, like, Magnus, of the guy who creates the Metal Man, is like, he's not just one of your creations, you know, she's really adamant in defending that he's not just a mindless robot, he is a person, you know, he has the consciousness and mind and ability to think like a person, so stop thinking of him that way. But when he becomes human, she didn't even realize how much she wanted that, and it becomes really hard for her to let go. And the moment where she, her daughter, and, you know, Red Tornado's John Smith in his new human body embrace for the first time, and she just starts crying. You know, she's like, she feels his hand and it's warm, and the emotion that comes with that, it's a great scene. But of course, because of this, you know, Reddy is what they call Red Tornado. So Reddy is starting to really struggle with his identity. He doesn't really know who he is without his old robot body. And when his old robot body is stolen, he doesn't really know what that makes of him. I mean, he is human now, but he still has to ask the questions, what does it take to be human? So without his old body, he doesn't even know who he is. And if that wasn't bad enough, his arm can't stop shaking. And he doesn't know if this is normal or if there's something wrong with this body he's in. As I mentioned in my top 10 best robots list, if you want more details on that, you can just go watch it. I've seen many times robots wanting to be humans that were put in robot bodies, but I've never seen a story where a robot was put into a human body. It's really a unique perspective because it makes it a really unique point of view, because now he has to ask himself the questions that the human heroes have already answered. You know, can I die? Is it worth the risk putting my life in danger if there's a possibility that I might not make it? Is it worth doing this even though you risk leaving your loved ones forever? Because before this, if he died and his body was destroyed, his body would eventually you just put all the pieces in a pile and it would eventually repair itself and he'd go right back in. But now, he can die. I also like what the villains are up to. We find that the person who was the one who orchestrated the theft of Red Tornado's body was actually Anthony Ivo, the creator of Amazo. And he did it for two reasons. One, to build a new Amazo out of Red Tornado's body, and two, so he could finally die. See, the old Anthony Ivo was always looking for a way to become invincible, but now that he wants to die, and he can't. Oh, and also another reason, to kill Red Tornado once and for all. But we also get other stuff, like a Starro being used, this guy who claims he's Mr. Miracle's brother. But the big reveal, and the thing that really blew my mind about this story when I first read it, was the reveal of who was really the mastermind behind all of this the whole time. And I know this is a little bit of spoilers, but I can't talk about this without talking about one of my favorite things I want to talk about later, so I'll just talk about it. The big mastermind, I'll give you a hint, he was born on a Monday. That's right, Solomon Grundy. It turns out whenever he dies, Grundy always comes back a little different. Like one time he came back and he was friendly. This time he came back, but he actually had his intelligence. Actually, more than just his old intelligence, he had a super intelligence. But now that he can think, you know what that means? It means he's terrified of dying again and becoming a mindless zombie. But I want to move on to the fights, because I like how Brad Meltzer and Ed Beans set up these fights. He gives all the heroes moments to shine where they show off their powers or abilities. For example, there's this big fight scene between Black Canary, Green Lantern, and Arsenal, and all these other Red Tornado robots that Ivo made to attack them. Black Canary takes one of Roy's arrows and stabs the bot 1,000 times until she finds his weak spot. I love how they show it, because she's just going all over the body, and then she finally finds the weak spot in the heel. And she says to Green Lantern, it's in the heel, and what does he do? He spreads a beam that shoots out and hits every single one of the robots in the heel, destroying all of them. I like that. They show that the heroes aren't just using punch you down. They're using, alright, we need to find its weak point, we need to exploit it. And they really do that well when the Justice League has to face off against Amazo later. Because when they fight him, they show all of their tactics and strategy going into what they gotta do. And they make sure every character has a moment to shine. And I really like that. The art in this book is one of my favorite styles, because Ed Beans gives it the right mixture. It's clear, but it can also be dark enough that when you really want to make use of the shadows, make something look ominous or villainous or cool like Batman, you know, they really can make use of that. The colors are bright, but not kitty, because they have to keep it realistic enough that when they show blood, you feel the pain. And I loved it, because when they show, like, there's times where there are times when Arsenal will shoot arrows into people and you see the blood splatter, and I loved it, because at this time when this came out, a lot of people were still having the mindset of, oh, comic books are such a kiddie thing. They're for kids. They're not for thinking adults. And whenever that was brought up to me, I would show this one moment. Near the end of the story, they team up with Grundy to take down Amazo, because Grundy was actually supposed to be going in Amazo's body so he wouldn't be able to be killed, but the Justice League stopped that, and so Amazo is going on a spree where he just wants to find out who he is. The League takes a portal to Amazo's location, but Grundy double-crosses him and grabs Tornado and pulls him back, seals off the portal, and starts trying to kill Red Tornado. Red Tornado tries to fight back and actually gets a few licks in, enough to make Grundy fear being killed and being a mindless zombie again. So what does he do? Oh, this. Oh, I love that. That is one of my top 10 favorite image in comic books. The detail that they go in is so good. You can see the bone! The bone! Yikes! This is one of the few times in comics where I actually kind of felt the pain of the character. I'm like, ooh, ah! I felt the pain that the character was going through, and the silhouette of Grundy then eating the hand. Oh, it's just the icing on the cake. So overall, I love this book. And to this day, if I want to read an enjoyable Justice League book, this is one of the few ones that I quickly turn to. I mean, and sure, I mean, this isn't a perfect book. I mean, there's some stuff that I wish was handled better, because, like, Vixen doesn't join the team till literally the last moment. She spends a lot of time wandering around, and I'm just, like, wondering what's her point in the story. And they justify it, but they really just justify it at the end. Hawkgirl is one of the members of the team that doesn't really get a lot to do, and a lot to, you know, doesn't really have that many moments. But his stuff was meant to be developed more in future issues, so... But for the most part, this book is like a perfect starting point for people who want to read a comic book. It starts you off, it shows you everything you need to know, gives you history on the characters, and where they're going forward from here. It's overall one of the best introduction books to the Justice League I've ever seen. I mean, the books that happen after this, they go from good to okay, and then the final crisis happened, and we don't even need to go into that. Let's just say it threw everything out of whack all over again. But one thing I will say, for most people, I wouldn't call this a must-read. I would say this is a very recommended good book, but not necessarily like a must-read, you must read this or else your comic book collection isn't complete. I wouldn't say it's a must-read for most people, but there is one group of people I would say is a must-read for. And that would be Young Justice fans. Now, I can see you have no idea where that came from. Like, Young Justice, this isn't even about young superheroes. What are you talking about, Laser Dude? Well, while I have no direct evidence of this, like no writers saying, of Young Justice saying they were influenced by this, I am 100% sure that this book is the inspiration for the world that Young Justice set up. And so, it's time to tell you why I think that, with the things that this book did that Young Justice also did, the similarity is okay. Number 1, the Justice League has a base both on Earth and one in space. You know, for the most part, the Justice League had like one or the other. It was either a base on Earth or a base in space. But this was the first time I ever seen a book do both. I mean, sure, Justice League Unlimited had one, like a base on Earth and a base in space, but the similarities to Young Justice are very apparent. Number 2, another thing is how they get to and from their bases. In this book, they call it going slideways, but the similarities to the Zeta Beam's tech is very similar. You know, before the Justice League teleporter was kind of like a teleporter off of Star Trek. You stand on a pad, it beams you up or down or wherever. And this one, it seems more like a doorway that you walk through and then you'll appear on the other side. Number 3, Red Tornado and Black Canary, which have big roles in this book, are 2 out of the 3 superheroes that really interact with the Young Justice crew in Season 1. And the fact that Red Tornado is the team's supervisor should be enough alone. Number 4. There is an episode of Young Justice where the Justice League is voting on who should join the League. Very similar to the fact of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman voting on who should be in the new Justice League. Heck, Wonder Woman is still on Captain Marvel for being inexperienced in this book, just like she is in the show. Number 5, Roy Harper, who is on the team in this book, has also a big role in Young Justice. In fact, he goes from being Arsenal to Red Arrow for the first time in this book, and Young Justice has both Arsenal and Red Arrow. I mean, that's pretty on the nose. And number 6, just a little one, Amazo and Ivo show up in Season 1 of Young Justice, as long as there being a big Red Tornado arc. And those are just one of the 2 of those things you would call a coincidence. But all put together, that to me is enough evidence to show that the people who made Young Justice read this book and decided to use the world that this set up as the basis of the entire Young Justice story. If you don't believe me, read the book and you will see the similarities yourself. So that's just my thing, that if you're a huge Young Justice fan, you might possibly want to read this, as you might want to read the inspiration behind the world. And so with that being said, my final rating for the Tornado's Path is 8 out of 10. This is a great book. Great pace, great setup, great heroes, great villains. The perfect way to start Justice League, in my opinion. I mean, with the exception of maybe Grant Morrison's Justice League book, this is probably and I'm not even sure if that one's better, but this is probably the best way to set up Justice League in my mind. You really get every individual character's thoughts and individuality on the matters at hand. You split them up, and then you bring them together in a big way, and the emotional core of the Red Tornado being in a human body for the first time and fear of losing it. And, you know, it's just, okay, maybe not perfect because I gave it an 8 out of 10, but it's very well done. And, as I said, it is the most read comic book that I have ever owned. I mean, honestly, there was this one time when I was going to Bible college that we took a little bit, like a mission trip to the Northwest Territories, and I bought a bunch of different comic books, and I read this one like 10 times more than I read all the others. In any case, that's all I got for now. Thank you guys for watching. I am Lazy Dude, and I don't have anything funny to say, so goodbye. Be sure to check out some of these other videos on my channel, and wait for more coming soon.